burger. Similarly, Americans modify the Chinese meal to suit their lifestyle and dining preferences according to American tastes. These types of stereotypically transferred food products are the symbols of the cosmopolitan behavior of the consumer, who will often have a very different attitude when he is relating to culturally bound foods, comfort foods. These types of products frequently have strong country of origin effects. Their appeal is derived more from the culture it represents than from the satisfaction the product actually provides the individual consumer. Number 2, personal hygiene. As with food, items of personal hygiene are very culturally bound. We often assume the entire world cleans their bodies and their clothes in the same manner. One of the most intimidating things a global manager can encounter in traveling abroad is a bathroom that looks very unfamiliar to him. The scents, forms, and packages of soaps, detergents, and tooth cleansers are high-touch items that require substantial localization to individual markets. For example, while the Japanese are among the most hygienic culture there is, and they have historically shared public baths, it is considered unacceptable for a husband to touch his wife's skin or to comment on her bath soap, body lotion, etc. That would be regarded as being too intimate, and advertisements for personal hygiene products could never picture both sexes in the same ad. Number 3, items related to personal relationships. Within the first 3 hours each child is born, he has been fed, cleaned, and held. His attitudes about food, personal hygiene, and personal relationships form before he is even conscious of his own existence. Therefore, products that symbolize the value and extent of personal relationships are also deeply rooted and require substantial cross-cultural analysis and modification in markets. Consider how different the traditions surrounding marriage are around the world. These are products and services, even if they are borrowed across cultures. They often have substantially different symbolism attached to them. Consequently, the marketing strategy in each nation may need to be very different. These types of consumer non-durables are not generally well suited to globalization. As frequently purchased non-durables, they are usually among the most difficult to which to apply standardization. Products that are a bit less high-touch but still require substantial adaptation or localization in each market are consumer durables. It cannot be assumed that an American refrigerator can easily be transferred as is to the foreign market. Japanese have so little space in their homes, they need refrigerators that are less than 1/3 the size of the average refrigerator sold in America. Western Europeans have room for slightly larger refrigerators in their homes, but have far less need proportionately for freezing compartments than do Americans, who typically use 2 to 3 liters of ice cubes made daily by their automatic ice maker in the appliance. In Southeast Asia and Latin America, the homemaker may shop for groceries once or twice daily. They need refrigerators more to store condiments and leftovers than the American housewife who shops only once every 5.7 days. The size, style, and function of a durable such as a refrigerator is also tied to cultural values and subsequent behavior patterns, and standardizing the item will usually result in low sales everywhere. One might suggest a durable, such as an automobile, is more globalizable. Certainly, many aspects of the car can be, since there are more uniform functions required, regardless of the country to which the car is being sold. However, even a product such as a car has distinct, culturally diverse value orientations. In more collective societies, such as Asian and Latin American cultures, the car is a social environment, often an extension of the home or office. In contrast to the American, especially the Southern Californian, the automobile is a personal environment in which the driver can escape the company of others, can be independent and venture where he individually needs to go, and can listen to his own choice in cassette tapes, talk on his cellular phone, or drink his Starbucks coffee. While the product itself may not require many changes, the positioning of the car through marketing and promotional tactics and strategies may need to be substantially localized. In the mid-range of the continuum between localized and globalized products, are the categories of products and services that are the bridge between global and localized strategies. In recent years, these products have begun to blur many of the lines of clear demarcation between strategies. Products such as computers and fax machines, and services such as Federal Express and the Internet are gradually creeping into the home use, also blurring the previously clear-cut lines between consumer and industrial products. These categories are neither purely high-touch products nor high-tech products. They generally require standardization so that systems can easily interact with each other around the world. These products that require efficient, integrated systems are often those that are pulled through to new markets by business and pleasure travelers who expect standardized accommodations in hotels and business offices around the world. In some ways, these two categories are the easiest for which to develop marketing strategies because they are able to bridge global as well as local markets. They are, however, in some ways, the most difficult market because they do bridge the more personal, culturally bound area of high touch that requires some adaptation and the more standardized, systematized categories of high-tech products. A UPS delivery man needs to adapt to local time schedules and degrees of cordiality in Spain, yet ensure that the packages are fully integrated into an efficient and timely global delivery system. There are two categories of industrial products, components and machinery, and raw materials and commodities, both of which are usually far more suited to globalization than are consumer products. By virtue of their need to fit into a standardized system of production, they naturally are more uniform. In addition, since most of these products are not personal, they are among the most global of products. In marketing strategy, often few changes need to be made other than developing adaptations in the personal selling strategy, the only individualized portion of the market mix in many cases. Whether one is selling steel to Mexico, the United States, or Malaysia, the product, price, and distribution are fairly similar. The industry is a truly global industry in sourcing and distribution. So it is only in personal exchange between the buyers and sellers that there is a substantial modification necessary. In creating a negotiation session, a sales call, or even an inquiry letter or call, the two parties may have very different expectations and standard modes of business culture. While the Latin American may be warm and friendly, first sharing many stories about his culture and his family, the German or the Swiss business partner may want to avoid the cordialities and get directly to the negotiations. With these institutional purchases, globalization works far more efficiently. There are not profound cultural ties to the product. They are not products consumers have been dealing with since childhood, nor are they generally products the buyer will personally claim as his own. The primary adjustments will be in organization, selling, and management style, as we will see in the process of globalization of solar turbine engines. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Olson. Let us begin with our first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, and please be as brief as possible and try to make one question per phone call. You may call directly our studios and to the phone numbers that are now appearing on your screen, both phone and fax. And please remember not to ask your questions close to the microphone, close to the monitor, so that we can avoid feedback. Thank you. And now we're having the first question coming in from Venezuela, Caracas, and it's coming from the Central University, Venezuela. Venezuela, we're with you. We're not ready yet. Will you please give the floor to some other country? Okay, we're going to take care of a question that has just come in via fax. This is coming from Cuernavaca, and it's saying, what does a company have to do in the first place in order to reach a world-class level?
Well, I think probably the most important thing is to have a really quality product.
if you have the best product with extremely good performance, you will have a very strong demand. People will pull the product through, suppliers, final consumers. So start with a good product and then work on a good marketing strategy.
I think that that's true. In some cases, some of your products may actually be more of a monopoly, and in essence, they think they may have a high-quality product, but they don't. And it's simply sold because that's the only product that's available at the time. And so one has to be careful as far as what one perceives to be as a high-quality product or not, what may not be high quality on the higher market.
Muchísimas gracias y ahora nos vamos a Brasil.
And this question is coming from KTV Communications from Rio de Janeiro. Brazil, are you there? Brazil? They are not ready with their call. Our participants are not connecting. And now we're moving over to Peru. Say, Lima, are you there? Are you with us? Peru? Yes, we have a first question now. National University of Engineering, Lima. This is the question. Why do we have in our countries, why do we need a world-class organization if our access to the global marketplace is hindered by many other factors? We don't have this easy access to this marketplace because of several obstacles.
I think that the primary reason for it is that, frankly, if you don't become global, they will come to you. And that they will eat your own lunch in your own backyard if you don't actually come up to world-class performance standards. Lois over here said that basically that many organizations perform this global localization issue, which means that you maybe have a good, satisfying product in your market, but that some international organization may promptly come in the next few months or years and promptly take over what used to be yours.
And I would second that. You really need to be ready, even if you don't have access right now. Competitors are in other markets. Competitors are coming into your market, and you've got to be ready to go as soon as it's possible for you to enter the foreign market.
Now, here from Tepic, Nayarit, Mexico. Next question is coming from Nayarit. Good morning. We would like to send our greetings to you from Tepic, Nayarit. This is a question for Dr. Chaudron. It is being said that changes bring about their own resistance to change. How can we harness this driving force to convince people that whenever they are resisting change is also good, because it is important, an important element, and this also pushes forward toward a better quality achievement?
As much as possible, you must be able to encourage the cooperation of the people who are resisting whatever you're trying to do. They must be made to feel a part of whatever organizational change that you're trying to engender. Without this, if you overwhelm their resistance, they eventually will become somewhat bitter and not really interested in terms of what the corporation is trying to do. A lot of this involves education. In terms of persuading them indeed that whatever kind of danger or risk the organization is having or is facing, that they actually have to do something about it, and the way or methods that you're trying to achieve are the way of achieving the company's own goals.
And now we are going to try to go back to Brazil, and we have a question coming from KTV Telecommunications, Rio de Janeiro. Dr. Chaudron, this is a question for you. We would like to know in general, what are the differences, the most important differences in the way you position the market, products in the market, before and after globalization?
You know what? I think you probably are the one better to answer that one than I am. I'm going to do that one to you if you don't mind.
Well, when you're operating in your home environment, you know the culture, you know the marketplace very well. And while it's not easy to be a good marketer, it is a lot less complicated than in the global environment. So usually you fit it to your own consumer. In positioning afterwards, after you have gone into the global environment, you need to stop and think about who else is in that market that is not just in my own domestic market. How are they perceiving the marketplace? The difference afterwards is that you have a much broader picture. And I'd like to add that sometimes in positioning in the global marketplace, you learn a lot that you can transport back home. Sometimes you actually improve your own strategy at home extremely well by getting bumped around a little bit in the global marketplace, because it's not quite as comfortable as it was at home.
And I think, too, that in addition to that, you're going to have to realize that whenever you start going globally, that whatever kind of systems you have in place that are creating this good product locally may not be sufficient in any particular case for doing something globally. You may not have the capacity, you may not have particular management systems, you may not have the proper information system to go globally. And so one really must assess these particular kind of systems before you go global so that you don't end up tripping over your own feet, if you will.
And now we are going to Mexico, the Federal District, and this is a question coming from the National Autonomous Mexican University, Faculty of Medicine and Veterinary Medicine. Our question is the following. Is it possible to say that standardization of products problem is rather temporary because of children and young people through the communications are also standardizing their tastes and their choosings and their selections, maybe through this global phenomenon?
I suppose that's probably most targeted to me. It's a very interesting phenomena. People will use the same product. Teenagers will watch MTV, will go to McDonald's, will drink a Coca-Cola, smoke a Marlboro. But the thing that's very interesting is why we do it is different. And that means a change in the marketing position and the strategy. You are not just smoking a cigarette because it's a Marlboro cigarette and you like the taste. You are, if you're in China or you're in Brazil, you're probably smoking it because it's a foreign cigarette. So while it appears that there's standardization, the motivations are often quite different, and that's what you really have to understand. And I might also add, that's part of what makes it really fun. It is not easy, but you learn a lot about how to market differently and how to position differently.
Now we're going to Mexico, to Guanajuato, from the Technological Institute in Guanajuato. Leon, how can you achieve that the global marketplace and the powerful governments not protect or not use mechanisms such as embargoes, for instance, which all obviously affects the small countries? How can we actually avoid this in a world market economy?
Well, that tells the story about trying to get American products actually into Japan as another one good case in terms of how difficult that can be. In a lot of cases, I think it takes a tremendous understanding in terms of why the barriers are there, a thorough knowledge in terms of what the levers are in bureaucracy to get things through, and probably a fair amount of persistence to try to get it in there. Otherwise, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. And you also, in terms of that, because you've had to do that on a real basis.
Well, I think you have to go back to understanding the nature of the reason, the cause for the embargo. And quite often, embargoes have a structure which allow different approaches. So there's not a standard rule as far as embargoes and openness of markets. But I think today there is a greater sense of free trade globally that will continue to exist. And frankly, we are hoping to see fewer embargoes so that free trade can flourish.
And now we send our greetings to Panama and all our participants there. This is a question coming from the Technological University of Panama. Panama, good morning. Within this notion of globalization, how how does standardization affect prices? How do price standardization affect the strategies for financing?
Ooh. I don't know.
No lo sé.
I would have to add, that is one area where if you try to standardize and you try to have a fairly uniform price, probably of all the elements of putting together the marketing strategy, it is the most difficult to standardize. Even if you try to have the same image, the cost of getting the product through, the cost of the financing is almost impossible to standardize. And of course, one other thing you have to think about is the market may not be ready to have the exact same price everywhere in the world. Needs of the marketplace might be different. And what you sometimes have to think about is it may be worthwhile, this is a very Japanese strategy, to come in at a somewhat lower price and a lower profit margin to sort of have patience, take the time, and build the marketplace. So in some of the new markets you go to, it may not be immediately profitable or huge profits accruing to you. But what happens is if you build a long-term relationship in that market, that then enables you to kind of platform and go into the next market. So I wouldn't suggest that standardized pricing is always the best objective.
And in regards to capital, one has to also remember that capital, in essence, is also goes across borders as well. Despite the preeminence of Japanese banks as far as for how much money they have, as far as capitalization projects, as far as financing deals and such, there's a number of American companies that have been very, very successful. And what they've been able to do is come up with some very solid marketing and capitalization plans, for example, like putting in dollar-denominated investments but selling them in Japan, or taking yen-denominated investments and selling them elsewhere. So you don't necessarily have to rely simply on your local capital to achieve this kind of global economy. There are a wide variety of other financial tools that Morgan Stanley and any number of other companies can actually put together on a global basis that can actually help you. And, oh, by the way, probably reduce a number of problems as far as currency fluctuations and other kind of issues which you're going to be facing once you really start going global and into a number of different markets.
And this is a question now coming from Panama, this is coming from Puerto Vallarta on the beautiful Mexican coast. Thank you. I'm calling from Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. We are here at a hotel, and we have a very interesting team of people working at our hotel. But we would like to know what you think would be the best tools and the means, the most efficient ones, for us to get to know the idiosyncrasy, the mentality, the culture of our worldwide visitors, to be able to offer world-class services to them here in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico.
Boy, that's difficult, given that there's so many different nationalities that are going to be occurring in there too. As much as you can learn naturally by books and all that kind of academic perspective, but also learn from the people who already are coming there. I mean, if at all possible, talk to them, interview them, get as much kind of information as you can from them to help you understand the current, or at least your current customer base. I don't know if you wanted to.
I might add that I think it's also very effective if you have the possibility to hire local nationals from the countries that you have heavy loads of tourists from, having them working side by side with you and coaching you as you deal with these customers would certainly be an advantage.
Yes, that's a fairly common behavior that we see in the hotel restaurant industry in the United States. In fact, an increasing trend is that all the employees will not only wear a name tag, but they will wear a name tag that says the country from which they come, or if they're from the United States, the state. And it makes the guest feel as if there's someone with whom they can communicate, and that the business, the firm, is truly an international firm welcoming guests from all over. It's a simple little tactic, but it seems to work extremely well.
And from Mexico, we're now going to Paraguay. And the following question is coming from from Asunción, Paraguay. Good morning. Our question is the following. what are the changes, or what are the organizational changes or the adaptations that are the most important that we need to implement in order to transform a company who is right now competing locally in order to convert it to a company for the global market, to compete in the global market?
I think that perhaps the hardest part of that is convincing management they need to change their perspective. If one can overcome that hurdle on a broad basis, the rest of it, well, I can't say it will be easy, but in essence is that you've at least gone to the first major hurdle. I mean, it's a matter of not thinking locally anymore and thinking in terms of a global perspective, what needs to be accomplished, and being willing to make whatever changes are necessary to make that event or that kind of global performance actually happen.
There are two professors at Harvard who've described it as the skeleton, the flesh, and the soul of the organization. And you can change the structure, which is part of what Dr. Chodron's talked about and part of what Mr. Barr will talk about. You can change the flesh, but if you don't change the soul, and in a funny way, that actually comes first. You have to sort of change the spirit. People have to want to do it. And that's not the easiest thing to convince people of, but once they get the bug, once they get the feeling, they usually love it. It's kind of hard to stop it.
I would certainly add reinforcement to what's been said. I firmly believe that leadership has to have the vision to take an organization and enterprise outside its home country into a global environment. If that leadership vision isn't there, the chances of sustaining progress and direction as you go through the bumps and starts of going international won't happen.
And now we're going to Mexico again, and this is coming from Aguascalientes, Mexico. Good morning. I have two questions, very simple ones. We're calling from the Autonomous University and the Business Administration School. What is the role of the franchises in the global marketplace? What is the tendency in this new business format? That's one question. Now, the second question is the university students here who have projects, who work on business plans, and my question is, how can they demonstrate their products in the global marketplace? Their business plan, I guess, that's the product that they're trying to show into the global market.
Well, and I guess start with part two, since the one part I can remember is, I think, certainly the cheapest and the easiest way to do that. The second part, to do business plans, put it on the internet. And if you can if you can register your home page with the various search engines involved, I mean, you can just be getting a global presence immediately, as well as various other news groups that are associated with it, various listservs, in addition to the home page. I think can give you some good immediate feedback in terms of the feasibility of what you're trying to do.
Yes, I have my students here at San Diego State write marketing plans. They usually select a country, they select a particular product, they're very extensive. And I usually suggest to them, pick one that you think you might like to actually do. And the number of students who get jobs out of it amazes me. I just had one from the last semester. They had written a plan for Starbucks in Singapore. One of the girls is from Singapore, went home over the vacation, went to the brand new Starbucks that had opened 5 days before, and immediately was hired. If your students can write the plans, most people in the world can't do this. This is a talent, that's a technique that's wonderful. What you have to do is simply put it in front of people, and as Dr. Chodron says, a wonderful way to do it is the internet. Except for one problem with that, they may borrow your ideas and not give you credit for it. And you might want to hold on to that, but there are lots of opportunities to actually present it to the customer, to the country, as is.
Yeah, and now we are going to hear from Coahuila, Mexican Technological Institute or University. In order to access international global markets, is it necessary to have standardized products? This is one question. How long do you think we need to go before we reach a satisfactory level of in order to compete in the global market, quality-wise? How long does it take for us to get there?
It depends upon where you start. I think that's probably what the hardest part is. It can be, with a concerted effort and with a reasonable amount of capital, I can see in terms of we can be doing that in the course of 2 or 3 years. In some particular cases, you may already have the quality systems in place, and so in essence, it might be relatively easy for you to be exporting it to world-class standards. Probably that's not the case most of the time, and that you're going to have to probably invest a fair amount of training dollars, capital dollars, changing in machinery and equipment and the like, for you to be coming up to world-class standards. And I don't know, you probably have experience with that for sure.
Well, it's I think in capital goods it's a little bit different in that most of the global competitors have fairly standard or similar levels of quality. I would say as we see capital goods coming from developing countries, still in the equipment business, there are economies which are prepared to take the trade-off between quality and first cost. Certainly that